Hello and welcome to the Health Odyssey podcast, episode 190. Now, we have got a different episode. We've got a guest on today talking about, I should say, something very different, something that in our 190 episodes we've not spoke about before. So I'll introduce you to him in a minute. First of all, I'm just going to touch base with Mr. Peter Lant and see how he's doing. How are you doing, Pete?
I'm doing very well. I reckon we should get cracking on with this so we can talk about 80s movies for an hour. Just do that.
Okay, good. Well, I know. Well, we're next week. We don't want to get stuck in this podcast time lapse timeline, but next week we've got we're over in Belfast, aren't we? With Paul McElroy and
Yes.
yes.
You mean like three or 4 weeks ago, but next week.
Yeah, next week from when we're recording. Yeah, okay. Good. Okay, we won't go down that rabbit hole. Okay. So we are going to be joined today from, I think, is it North London?
Yes.
Yes. From North London by Elisha Millard, AKA Electric Farmer, which we're going to which we've just heard a little bit about, which is absolutely fascinating. This guy's got the reason we've got him on is to talk about, I suppose, kettlebell juggling is the big thing, which Elisha does, and hopefully after today you'll all follow him anyway on social media and see some of the incredible things that he does. But there's a whole other side to him in terms of music teaching, music producing, sound designing, all stuff that to do with kind of hence the Electric Farmer, which we'll talk about in a bit. But Elisha, how are you doing? You okay?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. No, it's really, really nice to meet you. We were put in touch with you by former guest on the show, Ollie Mel. And I know that recently, I think it was a few weeks back now, you did a special demonstration at the English Kettlebell Sport Championships, I think in Northampton, which I've spoke to a few people who were there actually and said it was really fantastic, the demo that you put on. So I suppose really, Elisha, I mean, kettlebell juggling is something we can talk about more as we go through the podcast, because there's so many. I was watching one of your tutorials the other day and you were talking about, I think it was like helicoptering, where the kettlebell kind of spins horizontally, or the handle spins horizontally.
Yeah.
But it's just the level of first of all how that all came about, but the level of dexterity, coordination, hand-eye coordination that it must require is mind-blowing. But I suppose first of all, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about where you're from, your background, how you got introduced to, or what avenue you came into sport or exercise or training, how you got introduced to the kettlebell, what that looks like, and how you progressed to doing this very, very unusual thing, which is highly skilled and seems to be growing in popularity, I think. Yeah, do you want to kind of just maybe wherever you want to kick us off, Elisha? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's a lot to cover. Thanks for the intro. I'm originally from Wolverhampton. I moved to London when I was 28 to pursue a degree in sound design. Prior to that, when it comes to sports, I guess I've dabbled in a few things throughout my life. I've never really been a trainer, or I've never been into sort of bodybuilding or anything like that, but I've always been interested in extreme sports and the things that are a bit more left field. Started off with motocross when I was very young, from the age of 7 to 9. Really got into BMX. Became quite obsessed with that until I found the guitar around 15. And I absolutely fell in love with the guitar, and I stopped doing anything else. I was also into drawing. I wanted to be an animator, and that all just went out the window when I found the guitar. So I was in a number of bands, working in kitchens. I've worked as a chef and a kitchen assistant in numerous places. And yeah, so when I sort of decided to pursue a degree, I decided to move to London, got a degree in sound design, and sort of throughout my 20s, I was also producing music under the name Electric Farmer, which comes from my sort of love for old sci-fi movies, 80s and 90s sci-fi movies, and electronic artists like Boards of Canada and Aphex Twin. And we had a lot of road trips from Wolverhampton to Wales, and just being a passenger in the car through the countryside, looking up at pylons and stuff. It all comes together to sort of create this Electric Farmer character that I've been living with for a long time now, and it's kind of stuck. And yeah, so kettlebells I got into when we went into lockdown. I'd never really exercised before, never worked out in a gym. I was 32, 33. And I started listening to podcasts. I had a lot of time on my hands. I was on furlough for months. All the gyms were closed, and there was a lot of talk about kettlebells and how you can gain a lot of strength and endurance using kettlebells. And coincidentally, my fiance, she's always had a couple of kettlebells just lying around. We've never really used them, but she used to use them a long time ago. Before I met her, she was given them by a PT, Wolverhampton kettlebells. And along with those kettlebells, he gave her a DVD, which was by a chap called Paul Connor, who's still quite big on the sports scene. He's a High Rocks competitor now. And I watched this DVD, and I loved the way everything was put together, and the way that Paul was explaining the exercises and safety and form. And I really got into just practicing reps, practicing cleans, practicing my presses, and I really got into it. I quite enjoyed it. So I mentioned I was into BMX when I was a kid, and I feel like the kettlebell is, for me, physically closely related to BMX. The handlebars are the same width. You're sort of swinging it around. So I carried on with my kettlebell journey throughout gyms being closed and such. Oh, thank you very much.
Oh, have you just been given a drink there?
Yeah, nice cup of
Stealth. That was stealth. That was.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so everything I get into, I get sort of obsessed with, even if it's only a short period of time. I think back to yo-yos when I was in school. Yo-yos were huge for like a year or two, and I became obsessed, like following idols, getting videos.
Did you have the Diablo? Was it a Diablo?
I had the Pro Yo 3.
Yeah, I did the same. I was into yo-yos at school. I had loads of them. There was the little Coca-Cola ones, wasn't there? Do you remember those? Sprite and Coke, and everyone were doing them.
Yeah.
And then I got the one, like the big plastic, like massive sides, and like it was a Diablo. I'm sure it was a Diablo.
Yeah. I remember those. Those were pretty cool.
That was great.
But yeah, that was another obsession. Anyway, so I became obsessed with kettlebells. Started looking into all of the competitors, all the different types of sport, because, well, there's a whole rabbit hole you can go down when you get into kettlebells. And I started to learn there are different styles like hard style and GS, and yeah, I just having a lot of fun with that. And along that road, down that rabbit hole, I came across a crazy Russian guy called Michael Lisichkin, who posts everywhere. Anywhere there's a kettlebell page, he posts a video there. He's a fantastic juggler and a stuntman and former kettlebell sport competitor. And I started to sort of idolize him from his videos, because he was like throwing the kettlebell really high, and forming these sequences. We call them combinations. And to see that then, it was like watching him in fast forward. I couldn't really figure out what was going on. It was so quick. But I really wanted to learn what he was doing and understand what was going on there. So I just started trying it out in the gym. just sort of flipping the bell, see if I can catch it. There were really poor kettlebells that I had access to at the time. When the gyms opened back up eventually, I think it was 2021. There were cast iron kettlebells with these really weird handles, but I managed it somehow. I've got some videos of back then, and I looked terrible.
So did you start experimenting with these kind of kettlebell flips and things in a kind of a public gym?
In a commercial gym, yeah, pretty big one on the high street here in Wood Green.
And what kind of reaction did you get from either the trainers and the management or other gym goers? Because I'd imagine you're the first person or the only person in there to kind of try and do something like this. What was the reaction you got?
Yeah, when anybody would say anything, they'd be like, "That's crazy, you're crazy." But most people, they just look and they're like, give me that sort of weird, intimidating look, like, what are you doing? But that's fair, because when you're starting out, you do look a bit silly. You drop the kettlebell a lot, you might be using the wrong technique or something, but you have to go through that to get to a good level where it looks impressive. And yeah, I just put my earbuds in and just sling it around, and I was really getting into my own world, and it's a nice sort of escapism.
So I'd imagine that when you're doing this, so first a couple of questions I suppose come off of this. The fact that you were really into kind of motocross and BMX, and then you mentioned yo-yos as well, and then the kettlebell juggling. I mean, they're all quite I mean, did you juggle as well? Can you juggle like
No,
or whatever?
no.
You can't juggle? No.
No, you know what though? My mum, I didn't know this, but my mum's pretty good at juggling those little softballs. So I guess I've got it from her maybe. She bought me some for Christmas, but I'd much rather throw the kettlebell around.
Yeah. I suppose, and the guitar and things, you've got a lot of, obviously, I mean, this is quite interesting because Pete, you play the guitar, don't you, Pete? You juggle, you do your Rubik's cubes. So
all those sorts of things, yeah.
All those sort of things. So it's kind of seems like, so that dexterity of playing the guitar even, and that coordination of being able to catch the kettlebell as it's spinning and as it's turning. Did you take to kettlebell juggling fairly naturally? I know there was times you said you used to drop it and so on, but I mean, do you think that you took to it fairly quickly compared to other people, or?
Yeah, I think I have. Yeah, I'm not really one to brag, but I've come to quite a competitive level in a very short amount of time. So I started just fooling around with it in around April, May 2021, basically when the gyms opened up. By November 2022, I was competing at a professional level in Poland against people that have been juggling for a number of years. So I do think I've advanced quicker than most would, but I've also put a lot of time into it, and I'm quite observant when it comes to watching videos. I have had some coaching as well from one of the top jugglers in the world, really. She's been coaching for 30 years, Oksana Nikifor from Moscow. And that really helped catapult me. I was with her for just a few months though, and the rest I've picked up on my own. I think when you really feel into the technique, and with repetition as well, you can go as far as you want to.
What's it judged on then? Is it like BMX and stuff like that? Is it judged on technicality, difficulty, and then like smoothness and all that sort of stuff? You know what I mean? Like it's like BMX or diving or something like that. One of those types of disciplines.
Yeah, it's very similar to all of those that you've mentioned. So with kettlebell juggling, especially now that we're doing competitions in the West, because this is very much from East Europe. It originated in East Germany and it spread across Russia and Serbia and Bulgaria, and that's really where a lot of the competitions take place. But since 2022, when the champion of the 2021 championships started up his own competition in Poland, and we've been spreading across the West, and hence we had a competition in Spain, and we've got another one coming up in the US. So the way it's operated, there's a few categories. Classic kettlebell juggling, which is what I specialize in. Classic kettlebell juggling competitions have been going on for 3 decades now, and the rules are pretty much the same. There's just a few things that have changed over that time, but basically you need to perform 30 different elements. That's different throws. They all need to be unique throws within a certain amount of time. So the average time is 3 to 4 minutes, but you've got up to 6 minutes to do it in. And those elements can't be, you can't put the kettlebell down throughout your whole performance. And you're scored on the number of rotations. So when you throw the kettlebell, you're trying to rotate the kettlebell. And the more rotations you can throw, the higher scoring the element is. And yeah, so there's classic men's kettlebell juggling, which is 16 kilo kettlebell. For women, it is 8 kilos. And there is also power juggling, which is the same as classic, but heavier weights. So for men, it's 20 kilos. And for ladies, it's 12 kilos. Now in the West, we also have freestyle juggling, which is much less disciplined. You're scored on technique and execution, but it's a very short sequence, maybe 3 or 4 moves, and then the next person does their thing. And we do freestyle battle, which is like 2 jugglers facing off. One has to execute their combo, and then the opponent has to mirror that combo, and vice versa.
It's brilliant. It's like urban kettlebell, isn't it? Like, you know, one of the things that comes from the streets, sort of thing. But like, because like what you were saying there, so my mind's going crazy now, because it's like, I mean, I've seen you do it, and I've seen the guy, I can't remember his name, the
Michael.
Yeah, I've seen him do it, because he does push-ups on rings and with screwdrivers facing him and all this sort of stuff, doesn't he? Just like crazy stuff. But you said you have to, because there's an endurance element there, especially in the one you compete in, because if you're going for 4, 5, 6 minutes, even with a 16 kilo, it's like you've got to.
Yeah.
Fair enough. It's not that heavy a weight, but you've also got, there's a technical side to it, so you've got to keep your brain in focus as well.
Yeah.
And then 30 different, so it's counted on rotations, 30 different unique ways of throwing it. That's what my brain can't come up with, because I'm like, how many other, you know?
Well, the other thing I was thinking about, Elisha, is you said you get scored how many times it rotates, but when I watch those videos that you do, I mean, there's no way I'll be able to, you know, I mean, I know the judges are obviously experts, but to be able to look at something and say, well, that was 6 spins, that was 4, that was 3, that was 2, that was, you know, and yeah, so it just, and I suppose if you mentioned, if you drop the bell, if the bell slips out of your hand and you drop it, is that kind of game over? You stop there. That's the end of your.
It'll be like ice skating as well, wouldn't it? With like, there's a triple toe loop and a triple axel and a triple this and a triple. They do it, and I'm like, they just spun around for a bit. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely on point there, and it is very much like gymnastics, but instead of your body spinning, the kettlebell is spinning, and it is a lighter weight compared to those who are doing long cycles and things like that. But when that weight is coming down from 12 feet in the air, it's a lot heavier than 16 kilos, and it is definitely an endurance thing. Once you've finished your program, you're sort of out of wind for a good few minutes. And when you're doing really high rotations and high scoring combos, it takes a lot of effort to get the kettlebell up that high. So the higher scoring the program is, the more energy it's going to consume from you. And at the same time, you do have to think about the next sequence, what you're going to do next. Dropping the kettlebell is the biggest penalty of all, because you lose the most points. You lose all the points for that element. You'll have points deducted for dropping the kettlebell, and you'll lose points for you get bonus points for combining sequences. So if you do one element after the other, you'll get bonus points for doing them together. If you drop one of those elements, you lose the score for that element, the bonus points, and a deduction for dropping the kettlebell. So it can be some people actually end up with minus points if if you drop the kettlebell sort of 5 or 6 times, you're going to end up with minus points. It's really really crucial that you run through your program time after time after time, months up to the competition, so that you can guarantee you're not going to drop that kettlebell even when there's 40, 50 people watching you.
It sounds, yeah, it's almost like dancing, I suppose, like not that I've watched it for decades, but like sort of Strictly Come Dancing or something you see on TV when they're rehearsing this one move, this dance that's going to last for 2 minutes, say, and you just rehearse it over and over and over and over again, so that when you step on to the dance floor, that you know it inside and out, ideally, and you're going to perform it. And I presume that doing this, like you say, is just rehearsing it. And what's that saying? Don't practice till you can get it right. Practice till you can't get it wrong, kind of thing. So you just keep doing it. But it sounds really complicated. I mean, the points, is it really, I mean, the judges, how they're judging it and how they're keeping a track of what's going on and the points and things. I mean, that sounds incredibly complicated, the way that they'd work out the points and who wins and who doesn't, or who places where. I mean, is it very, very, very complicated, or is it just complicated because we don't know what we're looking at?
Yeah, I think it's just because it's fresh to you. It is a little complicated. I mean, it takes I think there's always at least 3 judges for one performance. So you've got 3 people's observation to rely on. There's a lot of things to consider, like you'll get penalties for sort of making an extra step when you're catching the kettlebell, because sometimes the weight comes down so heavy it can shift your body, and if you make that extra step, you'll lose some points. You'll lose points if the handle's sort of off axis, and you'll lose points if you throw an element that isn't the one that's written down in your program, because you give your program to the judges, they can see everything you're going to execute. If you do anything wrong, you'll lose points. So it's pretty tense, and for the judges, they have to really keep their eye on the whole performance.
So is it like, would you then, like, if you got 3 judges scoring, do they take like an average of the three scores? You know what I mean? If they come out with slightly different scores, do you do an average of 3, or how does it work?
Yeah, I actually can't comment on that. I've not really seen. Well, I've competed twice now, and the last time I competed, I think it took 2 or 3 hours for them to put all of the results together. It was quite a big it was quite a big competition, but yeah, I can imagine it's really quite a stressful experience.
I was going to say, I'm getting stressed out just listening to you talking about it. It must be a nightmare when you're involved in it.
It makes normal kind of kettlebell sport sound really straightfortard, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like
I was just
how many
thinking
snatches you do, or how many jerks you do, or whatever. Yeah.
I was just thinking that, and it's not saying kettlebell sport's easy, because it's clearly not. The endurance aspect of it and the strength and all that sort of stuff, but it makes it sound easy. This, like, especially like you say, you've got to do one exercise for, like, say, the pentathlon for 6 minutes. That's it. It's like, that's it. Whereas this is, it's hugely what's the word? Complicated.
Yeah. I mean, did you ever compete in in kettlebell sport at all, Elisha? Did you do any? I know you trained in it because that's how you kind of got introduced to the kettlebell and the DVD and things. But did you ever consider, or did you ever compete or consider competing in kettlebell sport, or that was just sort of like the entry level that got you into finding out about juggling, and then you sort of fell in love with the juggling?
Yeah, exactly. I really just wanted to master the kettlebell and use it properly. I've definitely I was interested in achieving the IKFF.
Mm.
And I did start sort of training for it, but I didn't get a coach or I didn't really know what I was doing. And yeah, the juggling thing, when I got invited to compete in Poland, it really just took over because I'm going up against athletes, right? So they've been lifting for a couple of decades already. They've got a sort of head start on me in terms of fitness and strength. So I felt like if I was going to have a chance at competing, at first it was at amateur level, but when I ended up submitting my program, they said this is a professional program. So I really had to up my game and just be on the ball with juggling as much as possible.
Mm. And do you, so again, I'm asking the question because I know like 99% of our listeners will have no experience of this either. So I don't think it's a stupid question. But it's kind of more of a performance, I suppose. And is there any music involved? Is it because of your musical background? I mean, is it choreographed? Do you have music playing while you're doing it, or is it done in sort of silence? I mean, is it just that's quite interesting because I know the kettlebell sport competitions, they've got music playing in the background that it's quite a buzz. But I mean, for you, because you're having to be so concentrating on getting all these elements right, is it a music based or is it done in silence?
No, there's definitely music. We're all very passionate about music. I don't know about in Russia and traditionally they've always used music, but it's from what I've seen, it tends to be sort of classical and there's some metal tracks and stuff like that. Funnily though, now that it's coming into the West, the Spanish competition was an interesting one because we were all sort of listening to what music people had chosen for their performance. And it's not necessarily choreographed, it's just something that gives us passion. It's something to give us inspiration whilst we're performing. I particularly, I gain a lot more strength and endurance when I'm listening to a really good beat. So I have to have a good beat to juggle to. I can juggle in silence, and it's a beautiful thing, just listening to the birds and the trees in the park and the kettlebell sort of
Brilliant.
music was a big thing in the Spanish competition, and I think it's trending now because the track that I chose particularly for my power juggling performance, I didn't drop the kettlebell once throughout my whole performance, which is a rare thing in competition. And everybody was like, "Wow, that's amazing!" And the track just gave the energy, and it all just synced up really well. And after the competition, people started using that same track in their reels and Instagram and stuff. So
Oh, cool.
So what track is it? Because I'll have to have a look. Is it yeah, what track is it? I'll write it down because I'll have a look.
it's called rock shit.
Rock shit. Okay.
Shit with an exclamation mark instead of an I.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
I can't think of the band name now, which is really bad. But
No, that's okay.
I've
But
got the power of Google. Hang on.
so you had that playing live while you were doing your performance, yeah, and that's the one that you didn't drop the bell once. Yeah.
yeah, and it's crazy because with the power juggling program, a lot of us, for some reason, we hadn't written a program for this category, and we just went in there like, I don't even know if I'm gonna do power juggling, but then the organizer was like, everybody must compete in everything. So on Sunday, the last day of the competition, we were all writing down our program at the last minute, like figuring out what we're gonna do. And then literally all of the competitors were sort of wandering around the space, going through their program in their head, tossing around softballs and rehearsing. And I think I had 2 hours to just memorize it in my head. and then I performed it, and I didn't drop the kettlebell once, and that's why it was such a like wow experience, you know.
And is that power juggling? That's the one that you said. So you would have been juggling a 20 kilo, would you? In for that, is that right?
Yeah. If you're above 90 kilos, you have to juggle 24 kilo kettlebell. Fortunately, I'm 85 kilos or thereabout, so it's 20 kilos for me.
Wow, wow. It's so interesting, isn't it, Pete? 'Cause I mean, I know you love being outside and stuff as well, because that was the other thing that we were going to talk. A lot of the videos, and like I say, we'll give your social media a push at the end, because I think it's just incredible seeing what you do. But now when I see you, most of the time you're doing your kettlebell juggling practice out in the park and stuff, out in nature. And I think you mentioned like you're throwing the kettlebell so high now. I mean, you're literally, you're tossing it up and it's spinning. So you can't really be doing that in a public gym with other people around and equipment around and flooring and stuff like that. So you do that all outside.
Yeah.
Is the kettlebell fine to land on the floor and stuff? Have you ever broken a kettlebell by dropping it, or?
No, I've seen that happen though. Some people have. But I'm usually I'm on a field or something, so there's a lot of miniature craters around the place, but kettlebell comes out okay.
Okay. And have you ever
there'll be people walking around parks in London going, "What is this?" It'd be like crop circles or something like that. Be like, "That's this weird stuff here." Oh, there's this fella. He just rocks up and chucks them around.
And have you ever injured yourself? I mean, have you ever doing the kettlebell juggling? I mean, I can imagine maybe, mistiming a catch or something, and, with your hands and your fingers and things like that, or potentially dropping a bell on your foot or something like that. Have you ever injured yourself doing the kettlebell juggling?
Yeah, I'm touching wood now, but nothing serious. Mostly fingers. Knuckles often get hit. I was talking to a fellow competitor just yesterday about knuckles, because we've both got injuries on the same fingers in the same place. And we've got juggler's knuckles basically. I have dropped it on my toe twice, but it kind of just skimmed off my toe. One time it did go purple and I couldn't walk very well for a couple of days. But that's twice in, God, I don't know how many hours I've practiced. It's the same with anything that you do with the body. There's a risk of injury. But the head, a lot of people say, what if it drops on your head? That's just not going to happen, because we throw in a circular fashion. So the kettlebell's always going to go over the top rather than straight down. Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny because I had someone comment on one of my videos because I was doing some presses with no shoes on, like barefoot. And they're like, "Oh, you're going to hurt your toe if you drop the bell." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm pressing it. I'm not going to drop it. I'll put it down." And also, even if I do wear shoes, it's like 30, 40 kilo bell or whatever. It's going to hurt. And also, my thought went straight to the fact that you mentioned BMXing, and there's no injury worse than the BMX injury that everyone used to get when they were kids. Well, number one, there's the pedals hitting you in the shins, but the second one was coming off the seat and going straight forward into the bit at the bottom of the handlebars with you.
Yeah.
For the young boys amongst us in the 80s with your knackers, that really hurts.
Oh.
So
I remember,
you remember kettlebell on your foot is nothing.
Yeah, I remember coming off a BMX, going over a jump and coming off a BMX and landing like squarely across the crossbar.
Do you remember? Do you remember though? It had the pads on it, right? So it had the pads on the crossbar, the pads on the bit in between the handlebars, didn't it? And then there was the bit at the bottom where the handlebars joined the bike, and the axle was there as well, wasn't it, for the front wheel? And then they had the thinnest piece of foam. All the other bits of foam were massive. It was like pipe lagging, wasn't it? Like the pipe insulation stuff you get. But the little one around that bit, around that little knuckle, was the thinnest. So when you hit yourself off that, it really hurt. It's like, honestly.
Oh, dear.
That's why I haven't got any kids.
And then, Elisha, we mentioned obviously the whole other side to you, which we've mentioned, but the kind of music producer, music teacher, like you said, at a university in London as well, sound designer, and you mentioned the kind of inspiration from kind of 1980s sci-fi movies and things like that. So yeah, I think it was before we started recording, you were telling us about, you know, sound design, and I said that obviously I'm quite into my films and things. So, you know, the Oscars, you get sound design Oscars and things for movies, but you said you work more on sound design for like theater and like art installations and things like that. So yeah, I mean, is that something that is that kind of what you do? Music is, I suppose, what you do to earn a living, to as a job, to work, to make money, and then the kettlebell stuff is more of a hobby, a passion on the side. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So I freelance. So I do a bunch of different jobs. I teach part-time music production with Ableton software. And the sound design thing, I've worked for a few theatre companies, and I'm currently doing a commission for a craft artist called Shane Waltner, and we're putting on a exhibition in East London in Poplar, which is based on the production of fabrics from flax materials. So Shane has been growing his own flax in East London and producing fabric from that flax and thread, and creating rope and bags and clothing. And it's a big community project. There's a lot of people involved across London, and we're putting on a performance and exhibition on May 25th. And I'm one of two sound artists on the project. So I've been recording sounds of old machinery, like the spinning wheel, and lots of like wooden tools that they use for threading, the drop needles. There's a lot of things that I've learned recently that I can't think of off the top of my head now, but it's a really interesting project. And yeah, I've always been into using field recordings in music. I released an EP a couple of years ago, which was my first commission, under the name Electric Farmer. It's called Hackney Rooms, and the project involved meeting 9 young artists from Hackney. It was just after lockdown. We were still social distancing, and everybody was sort of suffering the effects of the horrors that had happened prior. So these artists went off to record sounds in their homes, in their rooms where they were sort of isolated in throughout this whole experience. And I created an EP from those sounds. So I transform everyday sounds into musical sounds, which I use as a sound library to sample from and create instruments and rhythms and such. And yeah, that's what I do. And the kettlebell juggling thing, I've fallen in love with. I've started competing, but I'm the only competitor here in the UK. So I've now founded the British Association of Kettlebell Juggling, and we're doing this across the world. There's an association in Latin America, Canada, the US, and Spain, and we're all just trying to promote the sport, get more people competing. And you know, when you fall in love with something like this and you enjoy it so much, you just want to share it and have other people experience that as well. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now, really.
Oh, yes, it sounds fantastic. It's similar to, you know, because it's obviously a very niche thing at the moment. And it's like we've had people on about like the steel mace, you know, doing mace and Indian clubs and things like that, and obviously kettlebells and kettlebell sport and hardstyle kettlebell. But this is kind of another sort of niche, but it seems quite I suppose it's like you, it's quite artistic, isn't it? It's quite, like you say, it's more theatrical. It's like an artistic expression, I suppose. Um, as
It's
opposed to, and more of a performance, you know, rather than a kind of a solid sort of just a strength sport, or how heavy you can do this or how many times you can do it. There's a lot more expression and things involved, which is fantastic. And like I said, I think I'd be really interested to talk to you about maybe hosting a workshop or something, you know, because I've seen you post lots of things of other people doing the juggling now, I think, who you've possibly, I don't know if you've been training them or you've introduced them to it and you've inspired them. And it's always interesting because I'm seeing people doing the kettlebell juggling, and then they've got kind of strategically placed kind of crash mats and drop pads around them if they're indoors, you know, and they're throwing it, and yeah, I suppose in case they drop it, you know, they kind of got these pads to catch the bell if it drops. Is that how, I mean, are you training other people now to do it yourself? Is that something that you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I am developing that right now. I'm putting the tutorials out because when I did the demonstration in Northampton, I met a number of people who were interested in having a go. And I've also been in talks with Ollie Mel and Alistair Lee of Wolfpack about running a workshop at their gym, and we're looking at sort of June time. And there's a number of people who've already signed up for that. So I've put these tutorials out so that they can start practicing basic stuff before we do the workshop, and we can sort of maybe move on to some more advanced elements. And yeah, we've got the competition coming up in Brooklyn, New York, in October 5th and 6th. So there's also new jugglers who could potentially compete, who could do with some advice and stuff, because this has come from Russia and it's only just growing in the West. There's not much in the way of resources available on the internet. You know, you can't just sort of YouTube kettlebell press the same as you can kettlebell juggling. So we're all trying to do some tutorials and help people get started and give it a go. Hopefully we'll get some more competitors out of it. But yeah, I'm also in talks with doing workshops in other gyms across the country, and that's definitely something I'm happy to pursue now.
That's excellent.
You're out in Brooklyn, actually. It's Steve Holland's out there, isn't he? Yeah.
I was going to say, yeah, Steve Holliner from the Speakeasy of Strength is in Brooklyn, isn't he? So
yeah,
hopefully be listening to this, or we'll tag him in it. And he's a guest we've had on the show before, based in Brooklyn with his gym. So that'd be fantastic. No, it's so interesting. It really is. And I'm just so glad we've had the opportunity to talk to you. Kind of, I suppose, almost, and not at the start of your journey, because you've obviously been competing yourself, but I suppose at the start of trying to expand kettlebell juggling in England and in the UK and in Great Britain. So no, it's really interesting, and hopefully lots of people will listen to this and be interested. And I mean, I suppose if people just want to start connecting with you and watching what you do, like I say, your videos, I find them, they're fascinating to watch, and the tutorials you put out. What platform are you most active on? Would you rather people go to Instagram or Facebook, or what's the best way for people to kind of watch you and get in touch with you, Elisha?
I guess Instagram's the first port of call, because that's where I usually post my videos first, and you can message me through there. I'm happy to communicate via Facebook as well. I'm quite active on there. But my name on there is Elisha.
Okay. Yeah, because I thought I'm friends with you obviously on you're down as Electric Farmer, aren't you? Is that right?
Yeah, I think on Facebook you mean, or
No, on Instagram.
oh yes, yeah, on Instagram, Electric Farmer.
Yeah, that's easy. Yeah, because I found you. Yeah, I'll give you a follow there on that now. Yeah, because like I say, we're connected on Facebook. But yeah, Electric Farmer on Instagram, and you can see all the videos and everything on there. You got loads on there already for people to look at, which is great. So Electric Farmer, and then it's Elisha on Facebook, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. No, that's really good. And were you well received when you did your demonstration at the Kettlebell Sport event in Northampton? I mean, what was the reception like? Were lots of people coming up and talking to you afterwards and things? Did it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was an absolute thrill. I was incredibly nervous, performing in front of all these competitors. But it was really amazing. I met some really great people. They were all very welcoming. We had food and drinks later on, and yeah, it was fantastic. And I'm looking forward to attending some more competitions, and maybe even training to compete myself someday. But right now, I've got a big competition coming up, so I need to stick to juggling.
Yeah, one of the things that you said earlier about the weight when the kettlebell's coming down, from 12 feet in the air and it's spinning fast, when you catch it weighs a lot more than 16 kilos, or if the ladies are using like an 8 or a 12. Because I know that from like kettlebell snatching, they say, just coming from a straight arm position here down, when the kettlebell gets to the bottom, it's generated that much momentum, so it weighs a lot more. Or we talk about it with the mace, because the weight is on the end of the mace, and that's about, say, a meter pole, and when that's swinging. But when people go to your Facebook or your Instagram and see, like you say, the height that you're generating and the amount of whip that must be going on with this kettlebell, I mean, when that lands in your hand, if it's a 16 kilo bell, it must feel, well, what's it feel like? Does it feel like a 24? Does it feel, what, I mean, can you quantify it in your mind in terms of what it feels like when you catch that bell when it comes from that height?
I guess you could say, imagine somebody's throwing a 25-kilo sack of potatoes at you. You're not just going to sort of catch it and be still. You've got to absorb that force, and your whole body's going to sink back to absorb that force. It's kind of the same thing. And you mentioned earlier you can't really count the spins. I think it just comes with practice and repetition. Because when I first started observing people who were doing sort of quadruple rotations, I remember commenting, how on earth do you see the handle? It's spinning so fast. But over time, you just get to understand how quick it's going to go, where your hand needs to be, and exactly what's going to happen. It's kind of like practicing throwing a bottle into a bin that's a distance away. The more you do it, the more accurate you're going to get, because you know exactly what sort of velocity is required and all of that stuff. It all really gets absorbed in there, and it's just a matter of repetition at the end.
Yeah, from my experience of proper juggling. No, from my experience of juggling, like especially with clubs, I used to do that years ago. And you'd want to spin it once or twice, maybe it's even 1.5, because you can catch it like facing down and then do a spin with it or something like that. And you don't necessarily, like you've just said that, you don't count the spins, because the thing that if you're using a 16 bell, it weighs the same all the time. As in, when it leaves your hand, it weighs the same whether you spin it. Well, it probably doesn't, because you'll need to move a bit fast, like spin it quicker or whatever if you want to do 4. But you get the feel, don't you, of like, this is going to be 4, this is going to be 3. This is going to be a one where I spin it but catch it up here. This is going to be one where I spin it and catch it a bit lower down. And then, like you say, there's only a certain amount of ways you can do that, and then your brain just becomes used to it. So you're not counting it anymore. You just do it without thinking about it. But how's that between? So I used to be able to do that with juggling, and I'd be able to do these flourishes with the clubs. With my right hand, I'd catch it and do it perfectly. I'm right-handed. With my left hand, I'd be like, because obviously you could, it feels different in each hand. So how do you balance for that, or is that just the same? Is that just practice?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. To be honest, my left side is not as good as my right side, because I'm always practicing the right side. I think you have to be a very disciplined person to do everything equally on both sides. And there are people that do that, and they've become incredibly good jugglers on both sides. But yeah, it is, if you don't train the left as much as the right, it's going to be really strange and unusual. Like, it's like trying to write with the the hand that you don't usually write with. It's just, it doesn't feel normal or natural.
So there's no stipulation that you need to do a certain amount with one arm and a certain with the other. You could do everything on one side if you wanted in a competition.
Yeah, there's so many different elements. You could actually probably perform an entire program just standing in the same position, but it's not a very exciting thing to see. Out your audience and make it look like a really nice performance. So to have your turns and your unique ways of putting combinations together makes it a really nice and exciting performance.
And then just sort of finally, Elisha, before we kind of close up, we mentioned your kind of influence of, you know, the kind of Electric Farmer and the kind of 80s movies and 80s sort of sci-fi and things. What would you say, just as we are, what's your top top few kind of 80s movies that you like, that you were kind of influenced by from a sort of a sound design or just a movie perspective? What kind of films do you really like from that kind of the 80s and the 90s, you said?
Yeah, it's generally the ambience and some of the synthesizers that they would use in those films. So I can think of three off the top of my head, and that's Flight of the Navigator, Explorers, I think it was called.
Yeah.
And Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which features a very famous synthesizer called the ARP 2600, which just has such a beautiful, warm sound. And yeah, all of those things inspired my, they inspire my music creations and my Electric Farmer title.
Do you like Blade Runner at all? Do you like Ridley Scott Blade Runner? Is it Vangelis? Is that what you did on the music for that? I don't know. That was kind of synthesizery, wasn't it? I mean, I'm not really very into music, but I kind of just remember that. You know.
It's a big one, Blade Runner, and any sort of sound design course or music technology course that you'll do will probably reference Blade Runner at some point. And I've actually spent quite some time just listening to the room tone sounds that they used in the movie, which were made from things like air conditioners and stuff, just sort of pitched down and stretched out to elongate the sound. That sort of stuff's really fascinating to me, and how you can create something really soothing and relaxing out of something really industrial and harsh.
Oh, it's fascinating. It's really, really interesting.
Have you ever heard, it's on Lauren Laverne on Radio 6. She does house music, and it's basically people's appliances and what have you. Like, so it can be a lift or anything like that. It doesn't have to be in the house, but they take a recording of it and say, this sounds like the opening to whichever song, or this sounds like the middle bit of this song. So they play the song and then they play the fridge door opening or whatever it is, and it sounds exactly the same. It's brilliant. So like there's music everywhere that you don't even realize you hear, and then like a certain tempo can sound like an intro to a certain song of a certain sound of a toaster or something like that. It's brilliant.
And I think we're more accustomed to it now. 50 years ago, or longer now, when Stockhausen was recording trains and aeroplanes and running it through magnetic tape, it was reserved for the academics. It wasn't exactly radio friendly music. But nowadays you can do so much with it. You can make hip hop or pop music with a washing machine, tumble dryer, air conditioner. There's a duo called Matt Moss who created an entire album with a washing machine, I think it was.
There's a guy, one of the guys who I train, actually, a guy called Dave. Dave Voss. Shout out to Dave Voss. I don't even think he listens to this podcast, but he was on Radio 6 Music. He was on Stuart McConey's Freak Zone, which is on a Sunday night, and he's the name of his he's not a group, it's him and his mate did it on their phones. His mate's actually like a bit of a producer, so he would just produce stuff on his phone and send it to his mate, and they did that over a few months, and they've produced this album, and like they've called themselves Cheddar Hawkweed, right? Which is that's like a plant in like that grows in Cheddar Gorge. And the whole concept of the album is they're coming over the Mendips or something like that and up to Glastonbury Tor. it's like an alien visiting the planet, and that's the journey that they make, or something like that. It's amazing. It's really like, it's all kind of ambient, trippy stuff, but that's
I was
what he
going to say,
did.
it sort of sounds a bit like War of the Worlds or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. But that's what he
yeah.
did. He just, with his Saturday mornings, he was messing about with his phone, and then he thought, oh, that sounds good. And then he'd just like get a bunch of files together, send them to his mate, they'd put them all together. And within 3 months of releasing it, he released it at the end of last year. He was on Radio 6. It was like, how did you do that? It's amazing. So yeah.
I was just going to say as well, recently is it June and June 2 with like Hans Zimmer did all the score, obviously, but the sound in that's incredible as well. When you watch that, it's just so loud, you know, and evocative, you know, it's brilliant.
It's absolutely amazing. I love the vocalist on the first June, not the original.
Oh yeah, I know. They're kind of almost yeah, it's not shouting, it's not screaming. It's kind of like a you know, like, but it's almost like a prayer kind of shout, isn't it? Yeah.
Sort of goosebumps kind of material, isn't it? It's really good, really good. You
Oh,
mentioned Kettlebells as well. Jeff Wayne was that's one of my favorite soundtracks, I think.
what was that? War of the Worlds, sorry. Yeah. Brilliant. Oh, I'll tell you what, that's been really interesting. That's been really good. They're really good conversation, that. And yeah, it's fantastic. Because when you first come on, you think, well, kettlebell juggling, how can we, you know, what are we going to talk about with, but there's so many elements you kind of go down, and then the whole music and the sound stuff as well. And like you say, the music playing while you're doing the juggling, and how you can, you know, use music to, well, we spoke to Phil Maffetone, didn't we, Pete, about music and the effect that can have on the brain, and you know, getting into the rhythm and getting into the beat and drums and things, and just being able to keep you on track and in rhythm is brilliant. Oh, thank you so much for coming on, Elisha, and I'm sure we will well, I'll meet you in person soon, because you're only in London and I'm only in Essex, so I'm only sort of out the other side of London, and Pete's the other side in Bath, aren't you, Pete?
I am.
You are. But no, thank you so much for coming on. It's been really interesting, and I really recommend everybody to go to Instagram and follow you on there as @Electric Farmer, and on Facebook as Elisha, and yeah, brilliant, which is ELISHA, and then twice.
Yeah,
brilliant. Okay.
And thanks for the juggling community around the world as well. We really appreciate this. Just sharing and talking. It's really good.
Yeah, well, like we say, we'll be out in a few weeks, and then we'll kind of try and push it as widely as we can. And if you can share it around, and like I say, we have quite a few people listening in America, Canada, over Europe, that sort of thing. So yeah, hopefully it'll get the word out and get some more followers for you, and more interested in kettlebell juggling. But no, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Brilliant. Thank you, Pete, as well. And please do like, share, subscribe, leave a review if you're watching or listening on a platform that allows you to do so. Share this episode with someone who might be interested. You know, it's been a very different episode. It's not kind of, you know, hardcore kind of training, strength training, deadlifting, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of a really expressive performance way and it's a very artistic, expressive performance way of training and exercising, and you can do it out in the fresh air, and it sounds like it's great for the mind and the coordination. And I'd imagine as well, just finally, when you're juggling this kettlebell and it's spinning in front of you, you can't really have time to worry about, you know, whether, you know, any problems around in your life. I'd imagine you just totally have to, you're totally focused, and you're almost in a flow state, aren't you? So
I think that's part of why I got addicted, was that you can just absolutely switch off, and because you have to be totally focused on the kettlebell. So any worries, troubles, they're just out of the window in that moment. And it's an amazing experience.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We will be back with you next week for episode 191. Until then, enjoy your training. And if you do try some kettlebell juggling, please be very careful. We should put a disclaimer at the start. Don't just start chucking a kettlebell around. Certainly watch some of Elisha's videos, and also get in touch with him if you'd like any coaching or any help. But please do be very sensible if you do try any of this stuff. We don't want any lawsuits coming our way. Until next week. Bye bye. See you later.
Thank you, guys.